You're watching Saturday Anime on the Sci-Fi Channel.
Greetings, this is Reverend Paul, and this, of course, is Studio Chojin Raw. And once again, I am joined by Reverend Jim. Jim, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm all right.
Right now, we're going to talk about the original Cowboy Bebop. And of course, Cowboy Bebop is an anime that came out in 1998. It was directed by Shinichiro Watanabe. It was written by Keiko Nobumoto. And it is, it's kind of hard to describe because, it's sci-fi, but it's a mishmash of a lot of different genres.
That was one of the things that I noticed going into this little session, watching the series again, analyzing it, and really trying to look at everything in depth. It really takes a lot of classically used tropes and gives them a brand new spin by just putting them in the new setting that it gives us. And you get everything in the series that you could want. You get horror, you get action, you get comedy, you can get even close to romantic and then have that yanked out from under you, but that's a whole other story.
And Cowboy Bebop tells the story of the crew of the Bebop, which is kind of like a flying boat. And on the Bebop is Spike Spiegel, there's Jet Black, there's Faye Valentine, and then there's Radical Ed. And they are basically a group of bounty hunters that are kind of traveling the galaxy. And what we find out throughout the course of the series is that they're terrible bounty hunters because they're always broke and they're always in desperate need of cash.
To say the least, yeah, they're constantly in the red, and part of that is just due to their own destructive tendencies. Usually whenever they go in after a bounty, there's a lot of collateral damage at one point or another, or someone usually steps in, causes the collateral damage, and they get the blame for it. Or in the case of Faye, she just gambles it all away on dog and pony races.
Well, that's true. But that is the setup for this series, and this series is a very cool series. It's one of the classic animes to come out of the 90s, and it's definitely a good series for somebody. If you had a friend who wanted to get into anime, I feel like Cowboy Bebop is a great starting point.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with you. I've shown the opening to people that haven't even watched anime before. They hear Tank by Yoko Kanno and the Seatbelts, see the stylized credits, and they're just like, I'm interested in this, I want to see this.
The style is one of the strongest parts of Cowboy Bebop, and I also like the fact that, for the most part, Cowboy Bebop is episodic. There is an ongoing story, but it doesn't dominate the series. I think there's probably only maybe there's 4 episodes out of all 26 episodes that actually deal with the big story. But for the most part, they're just kind of standalone adventures. And each episode is kind of just a vehicle for these characters to interact with each other. And I think that's really the show has so many strengths. So I want to say the strength is the interactions between the characters, but that's not true. It's a good part, but also the action is really great in this show. As you pointed out, the music by Yoko Kanno is really great. It really gives the show a personality that's different from a lot of other anime.
Yeah, if anything, I would say that the score by Yoko Kanno, you could consider that kind of the show's secret weapon. It just makes what's already a good, solid sci-fi show and sends it even higher from there, just with a score that is filled with so many different styles. And it's such an eclectic mix, and they just kind of put it in a blender. And what ends up coming out is something that, when I first saw it back in, I believe it debuted on Adult Swim on Cartoon Network as one of the launching pad kind of shows that they had. And it's a show that really commands your attention.
When you look at all the promos for Cowboy Bebop, they do kind of give the impression that it's an ensemble show. And it is, but Spike Spiegel is the real star of the show. And he is the focal point of most of the episodes. He's usually the guy who's going out tracking down these bounty heads.
He's most assuredly your main character, but while the show is an ensemble, it doesn't start off as one. It's when the show starts off in that first episode, it is Spike's there, but you also have his partner Jet, and you can't have Spike without Jet. These are 2 guys that are out of the same kind of 80s buddy cop action mold, if that makes sense.
No, I completely understand what you're saying, and I love that about the show. And what makes the show different than a lot of other anime is that a lot of anime will have an audience stand-in character. They'll have an inexperienced. There's no new bounty hunter who doesn't know anything about bounty hunting and then gets mixed up with the Bebop, and then the crew has to show him the ropes. Everybody in the show is a veteran. They just stick you in this world with these veteran characters, and they don't explain anything to you. And I love the way the world building is done that way. And I love the fact that we're dealing with older, experienced characters and not like some shonen stand-in character.
It's interesting that you ended up describing it the way you did. When I think of the outsider character that's kind of brought in for the little bit of madness that the show carries, no matter what show it is, my first thought was thinking of One Piece, which is the show, manga, anime, whatever you want to call it. That's the one show that I've always pushed on people, probably to the point where they get annoyed with me and don't want to go and watch it out of spite. That's for another video. What it is there with One Piece, whenever they have filler, for example, they always end up going to an island and finding a kid, and the kid just gets brought along for the ride and gets this kind of worm's eye view of the main cast. But with Bebop, like you said, these are people that are very entrenched in the world it establishes. The more I think about it, Spike really is the kind of ground level that you enter. You're still watching him from a distance, if that makes sense, but he's still the gateway into it. He's not quite Mad Max, where you're seeing people reacting to what, I remember the Road Warrior, that sort of thing. It's not quite like that. It's more kind of just hanging around with him, and you get to see the rest of this universe.
That is the strength of the show, the way all this information is conveyed effortlessly without any kind of exposition. Spike Spiegel is effortlessly cool. I like Metal Gear Solid, but in Metal Gear Solid, every character has to tell you how awesome Solid Snake is. Oh my god, you're Solid Snake, the legendary soldier. I think that's Solid Snake, the legendary soldier. I've heard of Solid Snake, the legendary soldier. It's one of those things that, my takeaway from Cowboy Bebop is Shinichiro Watanabe is a genuinely cool guy who understands cool. Hideo Kojima is self-aware enough to know that Solid Snake cannot tell you he's cool, but he thinks it's cool when other people tell you he's cool. So I guess that's my way of saying Hideo Kojima is probably a nerdy dude.
I don't know where you would get that idea, honestly. He would keep something like that under wraps, I think.
That is what I think is so cool about this show, is the fact that it is not beating you over the head with exposition, and it is allowing you to piece together a lot of these details by yourself. And even when we start to delve into Spike's flashback, it's all told through these little montages and just these glimpses of things. Nobody ever sits down and explains everything.
It's such a laid-back show in a way. You have episodes that are maybe a bit more frantic than others, but it never really stops with that kind of let's just hang out. This is the kind of day to just sit back, lay down, take a nap if you need to. And, we gotta go and do work now? All right, we'll do that.
It's very 90s. It's very Gen X. It's a bunch of people in their 20s hanging out in the living room. They're overeducated, they're underemployed.
You cannot convince me that Jet Black is in his 20s, my friend. There is no way on earth that man's in his 20s.
Well, he's whatever. He's the older dude. But it's that dynamic of a bunch of fucking lower middle class people hanging out, just like every sitcom that ever fucking came out in the 90s.
It's a good way to put it, actually.
It's very Gen X. I was very surprised watching it about how especially now when we're living through the apocalypse.
Oh, God, yeah, we are, aren't we?
It's become so clear that this show is it's from a different time. It completely captures that kind of 90s ennui. In the 90s, the world was relatively peaceful. There were conflicts, obviously, but in first world nations, it was relatively peaceful. But in a lot of media, there was this feeling of with grunge, there was this ennui, there was this depression, whether it was tied to your economic situation or just a broken heart. So much media in the 90s was about depression and, having no direction and being directionless. And that's very apparent in Cowboy Bebop.
I just want to say real quick first that whenever I think of 90s, especially for whatever reason, God help me, I end up thinking of the song Pepper by Butthole Surfers. There's something about that sounds so incredibly you could only have made that song in the 90s, and it is so representative of that era. And you're right, that the 90s are really the perfect time for a show like Bebop to have been made. They're all kind of just stuck in a rut in one way or another, and you could say that's where we come in and meet these characters. Spike you get little glimpses in just that first episode as to what happened, that clearly whatever he was connected with, he got into some deep trouble and barely escaped with his life.
And that's what we kind of, find out about Spike as the series goes on, that he is a damaged person. And everybody in the crew of the Bebop is kind of damaged in their own way, but Spike is uniquely damaged. And he does embody that 90s 20-something protagonist whose his biggest problem is he's hung up on a girl.
That's a really good point. I didn't even consider it in that way, actually. Yeah, he's stuck on Julia, and again, you never get the full story, but whatever happened there, something big happened between them, and whatever it is, it's haunting him. And whatever it is, it won't leave him be. Slowly, as the series goes on, that past does start to catch up with him, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. There's still the damage to be talked about with some of the other crew members, to which I mention our favorite bounty hunter and poster girl that hangs up on my wall, Faye Valentine. Her damage just comes from being woken out of cryogenic slumber, having no idea who she was, who she used to be, what happened, and then also, on top of all this, has a mountain of debt dropped on her.
Faye is like a more realistic Captain America, where imagine they unfroze Captain America, and then the government hits him with a bill saying, Steve Rogers, this is your cost for your care and storage and unfreezing and shit like that.
That's right up there with thinking about what are the insurance rates for, life insurance, car insurance in the Marvel Universe. That's stuff that has to be asked, and no one really has an answer for yet.
Faye is my favorite character. He's probably everybody's favorite character in the series.
For a few reasons, I'm sure.
Well, what's cool about Faye is that she starts off as the girl, where all she does is shop and then bitch about the shower. But then as the series goes on, we find out she's just as capable as Spike. There's that one episode where she goes to that one place and she meets Gren, and she wants to pick a fight with the people in this town. Gren saves her, but he totally didn't need to. She totally could have beat the shit out of all those dudes herself.
There's a lot of people that she can beat the shit out of and make it look easy, but there's also quite a number of times throughout that series where she ends up biting off more than she can chew and starts off not even aware of it. When she's introduced to Vicious, our big villain of the series, she goes in there thinking that she's gonna go and just manipulate some sort of, here's the head of the mob, I'll go and dress sexy and I'll wrap him around my little finger. Then she sits down and sees his corpse is sitting there next to her, and you have this psychotic looking man with a samurai sword watching was it an opera no, it wasn't an opera performance, it was a performance of Ave Maria, and he's watching and he looks like Satan himself. And the look on Faye's face just tells you everything you need to know that, oh shit, I'm in deep trouble.
Probably the first of her many captures. The one thing, I guess, if people want to bitch about it, they could say, well, Faye is the chick and she always gets captured. Well, I think there is a reason for that. It's because she's impulsive and she doesn't trust anybody. She likes to go on things by herself without thinking. So even though you could say, well, this is a trope, I think it's very in line with the character they establish.
I wouldn't disagree with that. In preparation for this, watching the episodes that I did, I definitely see Faye as more the type to kind of manipulate. She's the type to kind of just take her time, work the crowd, so to speak, and once she's ready to go and make the kill, that's it. Business is taken care of. What you've said fits Faye like a glove as well. Impulsive could definitely be used to describe her.
It's also interesting to think about how Faye and Spike juxtapose each other, because Faye is a person who can't remember the past, and Spike is a guy who can't forget. I do like that, the way they are almost polar opposites of each other. And even think about how calm and collected Spike is, and then think about how brash and intense Faye could be. So, they really are polar opposites of each other.
And they always flip on the other side depending upon who's being what at that moment. Spike can be the very calm martial artist, while Faye is shouting at him to, why aren't you shooting this guy? Go out there and kick this guy's ass. And then you'll have, in a different episode, Faye's ready to go and take action, and Spike's telling her, wait, no, cool it, we gotta go and take our time with this. Sometimes it even can apply to Faye's interactions with Jet. Jet being the Danny Glover type, I'm too old for this shit. He approaches things kind of in between. Jet can have his moments where he's impulsive, but he's also constantly organized. Not in any kind of obsessive compulsive-y kind of thing, but it's from just his own past. He used to be a cop, and all of that combines to make him this little go-between, the sort of the Kirk, I guess, to Spike's Oh god, no. I'm stopping this thought right now because this is just getting too silly.
I would say Spike is Kirk, Jet is Spock, and Faye is McCoy.
I would definitely agree with that, especially if you go by, say, like Chris Pine, Captain Kirk. They're the ego and the superego right there in front of you. And that creates its own dynamic that is pretty interesting. They never feel comfortable 100% with each other. There's always something that one of them's keeping from the other.
Their whole dynamic is interesting, especially when you think about the fact that it is written by Keiko Nobumoto, who also wrote Tokyo Godfathers. You could see a lot of overlap with like the makeshift family in here and the same makeshift family in Tokyo Godfathers. Although it's like the messages of the two are polar opposite, which is interesting. They do have a realistic family dynamic in the sense that, like you were saying, they'll sit around, they hang out, they talk. They're not super pleasant with each other. Like sometimes they're contentious with each other. And sometimes one or two of them will just disappear. When I used to live with my brother would disappear for days. I had no idea where he was. And then eventually he would just show up, be like, hey, what's going on? I never asked him where he went or what he did, but it's like, I guess there are people who would say that's not realistic because wouldn't they care about each other? But it's like, this is realistic because like they're letting each other live their own lives. It's very sitcom-y for everybody to constantly interfere in everybody else's lives. And that these characters don't do that. They'll give their opinions, but they won't stand in the way of letting the other character do what they want to do.
Yeah, they'll go and just leave the other people to do their own thing. Faye's gonna spend the whole day in the bathroom, taking a shower, taking a bath, whatever she's doing, and that leaves Jet and Spike to go and deal with this. I think I believe it's Speak Like a Child. I laugh at that episode because it's such a simple premise. You have a VHS tape has somehow survived and has been delivered to the Bebop. So what do Spike and Jet do? They spend almost the entire episode searching for a VHS player. They go to every shop they could find, trying to find a VHS player, just to figure out what's on this goddamn tape. Oh, here's a VHS player. Oh, wait, no, this isn't a VHS. This is a Betamax. You need to find a Betamax player. They eventually have to fly all the way from Mars back to Earth, wade through God knows how much junk, and finally find a Betamax player. And they end up just bringing a mountain of just different VHS and players and tape players and God knows what else back onto the ship, hoping something will go and play this tape they got in mysteriously. Meanwhile, the whole time, Faye is out gambling. The video is actually addressed to Faye, and when they see what is this? Oh, it's a videotape. Well, it was addressed to you, Faye. Do you know anything about it? No, I know so little about it. I'm gonna go leave and bet on horses again. Once again, using up all of her money while she's at it.
And what also makes that episode so cool is that, like, by the end of the episode, they get a beta player delivered to them, so their whole adventure was pointless.
Absolutely. That was one of the things I noticed with this, was just, I marked the whole thing down when I was taking my notes for it, where just like, I guess there's not really much happening. It's just them trying to find this, and it didn't even dawn on me that, they got all these players, and now, they had a Betamax player delivered to them.
That episode, that's one of my favorite episodes. And because it's kind of slice of lifey, and it does a really great job in sort of conveying the relationship of these characters. And, and just like what you were saying, like, we get so much characterization of Faye without her having to go on some epic adventure where it's like, she wants to know who she is, but she's also afraid to know who she is. And then that reveal when she's watching the tape is done so well. And then, I'm sure when we talk about the fucking live action, they completely bungle it. But the way they do that scene in the anime, it's her face and it's her reacting and it's the images on the screen. The way they shoot that scene, I feel like is so powerful and like not over explaining things too much, where it's allowing you to connect these dots.
Yeah, I actually will go and disagree with you though. I actually did not think that watching Faye's video was completely bungled in the Netflix version. We'll get to that. There's a lot of stuff on the Netflix thing that I'm sure we're gonna go and probably bicker about a lot, but that's okay. That's why people listen. But I think both have their charm as to how they're done. I think the anime does it better. I would honestly say that the way the video is done in the anime is perfect. It's, like you said, just that shot of her, of the close-up of her face. You see her teeth tear up, which I think that's the first time we see that from her in the series, if I remember. And it's so strong.
The other Faye episode, too, the one that tells her backstory, is a really great episode, too, with when we learn about... And what's so cool about that episode is the way it's structured, because the first part of that episode is very earnest, and it's very serious and sincere. And then when we get to the second part, it just becomes crazy. And I love the fact that, like, when we see Whitney Haggis Matsumoto again, he's all fucking fat and schlubby.
I loved that. One of my favorite drawings in the entire series is when they bring Whitney onto the Bebop. He is this fat pudge of a guy. Faye sees him and just drops what she's doing, walks right up and gets within dog-sniffing distance of his face. And the face they drew for Faye in that one shot still makes me laugh. She looks almost wall-eyed, and you can sense the anger already building in her once she sees him.
What I love about that is the fact that, like, if I always imagine myself, like, if I was at a party and then, like, you know, Whitney Haggis Matsumoto's there and then somebody elbows you and they're like, hey, you know, that's Faye Valentine's ex-boyfriend. You'd be like, that's Faye's boyfriend? Like, you mean I had a shot this whole fucking time? She went out with that guy? You know, like...
Yeah, who'd have thunk, you know? That's like when I found out, what's his name? I can't remember the name of the actor from Super Troopers. The snozberries taste like snozberries. And then you find out that he was married to Christina Hendricks, and you're just like, no, this doesn't compute. Where the hell is this coming from? This is not for the real world, right? No, there's no way this actually happened. And yet it did. I still think about that, and I just get more and more confused the older I get.
Well, there's a part of me that even wonders if, like, maybe that, like, flashback is a whole unreliable narrator and he was always fat, and then we're just seeing this idealized version of him that Faye sees in her brain.
No, that's actually a good idea there. I never thought of it like that. For whatever reason, and considering Faye's penchant to go and compulsively lie, the fact that it never dawned on me until now that she could be an unreliable narrator in this case is... I should have thought of that, you know? It's funny because the episode's very clearly broken into those two parts. You've got that first half where it's just Faye talking to the dog Ein, who I don't know how we've gone this far without talking about Ein, the best dog in space. But she's just sitting there talking to the dog, and then at the end of her story, you hear a toilet flush. Out walks Spike, complaining that her story's too long. Cut to commercial. It's a perfect moment that shows this story is about to have the rug yanked out from under it. And that's exactly what happens once Whitney is brought onto the Bebop.
That's true. Like, I didn't even think about that. Because, I mean, like, it's not really a flashback. It's a story she's telling. Of course, if she's going to tell the story, she's going to be like, yeah, he was this hunky, strapping dude, like a mountain of a man. And it's like, nah, he was just a big fat dude who was nice to you.
It's amazing. Like, I could easily... No, I keep going back to it. It's like, yeah, no. Wait, Faye Valentine dated that? No. You must be mistaken, my friend.
That's what I'm saying. Well, you know, it gives all of us hope.
It does now, I can say that much.
I don't think there's a bad episode in all 26. All of those backstory episodes, like the Faye backstory episode and the Jet backstory episodes, like those are good too.
Absolutely. It's one of the things I actually was having a lot of difficulty with as far as like forming specific thoughts with the anime, because it's hard to talk about Bebop and not say that every episode is awesome. There are great subtle elements throughout them, but you get so wrapped up into it just by the really intricate package that Watanabe has helped put together. You've got all these stories that are weaving around, got all these styles that you didn't think they'd mix together, but they do. you have horror in a few episodes. Rewatching Pierrot Le Fou it's one of those things that is a perfect example of how animation is one of the best art forms in the world. You can do anything with it and make it believable.
I do like the way the show brings in horror elements, especially there's the one episode which is kind of like an Alien parody where Spike's old fucking leftovers that mutated into like a horrible monster.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that was Toys in the Attic, I believe, right?
Yeah, named after the Aerosmith album.
It even has the nice mood-setting narration that goes on. I think Spike is narrating throughout that whole episode and just gives it just a little touch of film noir style into the middle of a sci-fi horror story of just this ooze that's now taking over the ship. It's not getting bigger, it just moves quickly, it grabs onto you and takes you out of action.
One of the interesting things too, when I was watching the DVD commentary, is it Wendy Lee who does the voice of Faye?
Yeah, Wendy Lee.
She pointed out that there's not a lot of blood in the show. Like, it's not an overly violent show. So when they do use blood, it's very striking. They use it as punctuation.
Yeah.
Mostly, I think you see blood like in the Spike Vicious plot, basically.
Yeah, that's where all the blood really lies. Actually, the more I think about it, there actually wasn't any blood in Pierrot Le Fou. Spike gets the living crap beaten out of him, but he never bleeds. The only time he ever really bled, there's only like a handful, and the only times he bled a lot was with Vicious.
And the main theme, we're going to completely spoil this, so anyone who doesn't want Cowboy Bebop spoiled should not be listening.
Anyone that hasn't watched this 25-year-old series, spoiler warning.
And what we find out throughout the course of this series is that this is basically a story about personal demons and how you choose to deal with those personal demons and how you choose to deal with the past. Jet is, he's the Danny Glover type and he is the sensible one. And in that Elisa episode, he is confronted with this lost love of his and he is, like an adult. He asks her why she didn't wait for him and then she tells him and he accepts it and he moves on. I was kind of wrestling with the ending, if he truly moved on, would it have been better if he let her escape with that guy? Or was it better that he did come in one last time to protect her, to get that guy into custody just so they wouldn't have people chasing them? I tend to think he did one last act of kindness, but he did move on.
Yeah, that's the big linchpin to the episode is what's Jet gonna do? And yeah, he's protected her that one last time because he says even then about Elisa's boyfriend, look, he's got bounty hunters coming after him. If you guys try to run now, it's just gonna get worse for you. Then finally, by the end of the episode, exactly what you said, he's moved on, and it's symbolized just by that pocket watch that you just see him. He looks at it, remembers back then, throws it into the ocean, and that's it. I was always wondering if Elisa were to ask him for help, I would assume he would go and run in there, but would she be the type of person to ask him for help?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he totally would, but he's not carrying a torch for her anymore. This is where we're going to see later on he differs from Spike. But then we also get closure with Faye, where Faye finally remembers her past, but then she realizes that even though she could remember it, she can't go back to it. It's gone.
Isn't that one of the saddest scenes? She finally remembers where she grew up, finds the house she lived in, and it's not there anymore. She just kind of walks through the ruins of this old house, figures out this must be where my bed was, and just lays there and just kind of has to accept it.
It's a very powerful episode, and I could relate to it because I've done things like that in my own weird life. I remember being a teenager and going to the baseball field. I used to play baseball with my friends when I was 11 or 12. All my friends moved away when I started high school. I remember, every now and again, when I was a teenager, I would go back to that baseball field and I would just kind of sit there and just remember my friends. That scene with Faye when she draws that little makeshift bed and lies there, that was, very powerful for me.
I don't blame you one bit. If we're going into confessions, I will admit there is one relationship I was in where if I could go and put my words as beautifully as Jet put them when he asks Elisa, why did you leave? And I'm not angry, I just want to know why. There's one relationship in particular that I would give anything to ask that. It's one of those things where these characters are so easy to identify with. And it really is just so easy to see yourself in them in one way or another. Especially as I've gotten older, boy, have I been able to go and connect with Jet more than I expected to.
The older you get, the more the like Danny Glover sensible, I'm too old for this shit mentality, like you start to adopt. I hate to be a fucking old man, but there was a part of me looking at Spike going like, dude, you can't be this broken up over a girl. You know, like, come on, man.
I would love to see at some point if Spike has some sort of problem with Vicious he has to deal with, and Jet just tells him, like, dude, will you just get the fuck over this? Please? Can we move on? Because this is clearly not healthy for anyone.
Well, and the interesting thing, too, is that, like, when we finally meet Julia, you know, the woman who Spike is desperately in love with, she's kind of unremarkable. I don't know what he sees in her, but I mean, it doesn't matter that I'm not impressed with her. What matters is that he is. Like, I could totally see there being people bitching about, like, oh, this love story doesn't make any sense. And it's like, it doesn't matter whether it makes sense or not. What matters is that he's in love with her. You don't have to understand it. Just think about any friend you had. Do you know why your friends love the people that they do? It's like, no, they just do.
Oh, Christ, I can go and think of quite a number of people where I just look at them and I'm thinking, why? How? That's just making me sound bitter, which is not untrue, but I feel like Julia, people will say that she's underwritten, I think she's kind of more maybe an ideal that Spike always wanted to, you know, live up to in a sense, sort of like the little red-haired girl for Charlie Brown. I think it also allows you to go and kind of project your own thoughts as to what Julia must have gone through. You can tell that she's someone that's just as damaged as Spike. And when you get to that final episode and you finally see her reunited with Spike, and then the creators just kind of only give you a little tease of it. You never get a full-on reuniting, embrace, big kiss moment. You never get that. And I think it's better for it, because at least then it allows you to kind of fill in the gaps yourself, much like how the series has left you to go and fill in the gaps with all the characters that have shown up in one way or another. You see Spike's past and you can figure out what's going on. The relationship with Julia, the character of Julia is almost underwritten just enough so that you have an idea as to the character, but you're left to your own devices as to what else they must have done. And I think to me that's a sign of good storytelling, is that it leaves you with just enough ideas to think of your own stories, you know?
What we kind of find out with Spike is that Spike is an incredibly damaged person. I mean, I think Spike is probably like a case of depression, where he is dead on the inside, but he functions. He walks around, he smiles, he laughs, he interacts with people, but he is completely dead and broken on the inside.
I don't think he's entirely broken. I think Spike kind of clings to this memory of Julia as something to kind of keep him moving forward. Again, I can only refer to it as this sort of light that he hangs on to and tries to go and cherish it as best he can so that he can, in hope that someday they'll meet each other again.
Yeah, no, I could see that. I mean, that's why the last episode is so unsettling, because when Julia dies, he has nothing left to live for, and it's like, it's disturbing. Like, it's almost like you're watching a man who's getting ready to kill himself.
When I saw that final episode, and you see when Julia gets shot and falls and dies in Spike's arms, at that point, I'm watching the show, and I realize all bets are off. We don't know what's going to happen now. And like you said, Spike shows up on the Bebop after being gone for however long, and like you could tell in the way his eyes are drawn, that's it. He's done. He sits down, he has one last meal with Jet, busts Jet's balls, and tells him, oh, this food sucks still. And then gets ready to leave, and it's kind of eerily calm. You never see him react, but you see what kind of looks like the aftermath of his reaction. Like someone had been crying for a long time. You have no idea what they're crying about, but they walk in and you can see their eyes are red. They still have tears running down their cheeks. You don't get necessarily that level of detail with Spike, but you can tell just in how they draw his eyes that this is someone he's grieving. He is in pain, and I think at that point too, all he has left is that pain.
That's what makes that so fucking disturbing, because it's like, this guy is dead on the inside, but he is functioning. He is functioning and laughing and talking like everything is fine, but he is completely broken. I guess I'm kind of extrapolating that to like the rest of the series, but like you were saying, like Julia is that thing that brings him out of it, but now she's gone in that moment, and now he is just, at that point, he's completely dead inside.
He's a shell, a complete shell. And he knows it too, I think, in that moment. And what was it? He gets the last of his stuff together and says his goodbyes without saying goodbye.
It's like a person getting ready to kill themselves. It's so fucking unsettling.
Not only that, but Faye's reaction to it. When he finally turns a corner and there's Faye standing there realizing just what happened and what Spike is about to do. There's one thing I noticed as I've watched the series, and it's that a lot of the times they don't show that they care for each other like out and out. They do it in more subtle ways. In the case of, say, Faye, at the end of Ballad of Fallen Angels, Spike has fought Vicious and now he's wrapped up like a mummy there, just lying there on the couch of the Bebop, and she's actually showing concern for him. And there's small moments where all the other characters will ask one or the other, hey, you all right? You don't seem like you're in good shape. And that's all you get as far as them showing that they care. And when it comes time for Spike, and like you said, it's like watching a guy that's about to kill himself. And Faye's standing there, and she knows it too. And she just kind of breaks down.
And once again, we're getting that juxtaposition between these two characters where in that moment, Faye is breaking the artifice. She's not pretending, I'm annoyed with you. She's being genuine. I genuinely care about you, and I don't want you to do this. But Spike is still got the demeanor on. He's still a cool guy.
It's weird. Like you said, it's unsettling with Spike, but yet he still is this essence of cool. And one of the last things he says to Faye is just, look into my eyes. One of my eyes is fake. I lost that eye years ago. And at that point, Faye knows that she's not going to be able to stop him. She even pulls her gun out on him, and he doesn't even blink.
So in his final confrontation with Vicious, it appears that the two kill each other. But do you think it's possible that Spike may still be alive?
I don't think so. I'm actually glad that you asked this, because I was going to ask you. I always thought Spike was dead. What else is there for him if he lives? And I don't mean that in any kind of, there's no story left to tell. He's already had his character arc, even off screen, just by dealing with Julia and now moving on to the Bebop. And now whatever character arc is there, however minimal, that's it. There's no other stories to tell. You've gotten everything you can out of this character. One thing I noticed that I didn't notice until recently, I rewatched the Cowboy Bebop movie Knockin' on Heaven's Door, and I realized the final episode ends with that close-up of Spike's face. And then the movie starts. And it starts on that same face that Spike's making, only now he's just asleep. Because the movie was made after the series had wrapped, like I think a year or two after the series had wrapped. And now it's suddenly like, oh, wait, we have one last thing for Spike to do, and it's this movie. But I don't think he's alive after that. There's nothing left. And he went out with what was it? If I'm not mistaken, he went out with a smile. I can't think of a better way to go out than just that little serene moment, knowing that whatever business you have, it's finished.
It's a great ending shot, where he goes bang and falls over.
And I need to say this, the song that plays by Yoko Kanno, Blue, is one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard, and it still fucking brings me to tears to listen to it. It's haunting. It's 100% haunting. And then you hear the final lyrics, the final lick of the guitar, you see the shot of Spike, and the final text at the end of that episode, you're going to carry that weight. And I can't say that I've ever felt like something tighten in my stomach in a positive way, but I feel like this is one of them. It was emotionally affecting in a way that I had not seen much media do for me at that point.
What's cool about that fight with Vicious is that it's quick. It's not like the Obi-Wan Anakin Skywalker fight where it's like 45 minutes long. It's quick. That's it. And it's over.
Not only that, but like the fight with Vicious is quick, but part of it too is just him storming the Syndicate Tower. At that point, Spike is a goddamn one-man army. He's prepared, he's got grenades, he's got his gun, he's got whatever ammo he needs, and he goes in there, and he's not in great shape when he fights Vicious, but when he gets there, it's all you need there. You don't feel unsatisfied by the end of it. I'm a big believer in don't go all out. Keep some discipline for yourself so that when you're telling your story, you give the audience just enough to go and want to come back for more.
Well, what's also cool about that episode too is that like that final gunfight sequence, there's not a lot of score. It's just you hear the bang bang of the guns and the people running around. It's all ambient noise. Like they're not beating you over the head with score. And it's like, it really shows you like Watanabe knows how to he knows how to punctuate the scenes with music, and he knows when to take it out. Even though like you have Yoko Kanno doing like probably the best soundtrack in anime, he knows when you don't need it. It's perfect the way it is with just the ambient noise.
I had watched a video earlier this week actually that was talking about the comparison between anime Cowboy Bebop and Netflix Cowboy Bebop. And part of the production crew, apparently this is a thing in a lot of Japanese animes, that there's a lot of communication between the sound effects designer and the people that put together the score. And I think that's an incredibly smart choice, because her music, it both stands out and blends in perfectly, if that makes any sense.
Going back to whether Spike is alive or dead, I think there is an argument to be made that he could be alive, because he does die twice. He dies at the beginning and then he dies at the end. And then interestingly enough in the movie, Vincent shoots him point blank in the chest and he's still alive. And also what I find to be interesting is that when Spike meets up with Vicious again, he's not surprised he's alive. And then when Vicious throws Spike out of the church, he's again not surprised he's alive. There is this idea that Spike could be immortal, that he can't die.
I suppose if you want to go and really look into it, considering all the punishment that he's taken over his life, yeah, you could go and argue that there may be a chance, but I feel like there's a line in the movie where after getting shot by Vicious in the chest and thrown off the train, he explains to Jet that it seemed to be just almost sheer will that was keeping him from dying at that point. He had that will to keep going. Part of it was that, Vicious just affected him on a very deeply personal level, dealing with someone that maybe nihilistic, but I think at the point there with he's lost Julia, whatever he has left to live for, he's kept himself alive almost out of spite, you could say. At this point, there's nothing left for him to live for. Julia was his world, and that was taken from him. And the only way he'd be able to go and be with her after that is in the afterlife. So I think it's more just a matter that he kind of he willed himself to die. I'm not quite sure if that's the best way to put it, but I'll stick with that description, I guess.
I agree with what you're saying, and the story actually addresses this idea when Spike is having his last meal with Jet, and he tells him that story. Once there was a cat that couldn't die, and then the cat fell in love with another cat, and that cat died, and then the immortal cat died too.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that.
The story put these red herrings in to make you think that he's immortal, but then Spike purposefully goes out of his way to tell you that that's not the case. You can't help but wonder why. I don't know. Is that a story thing, or is that like something Watanabe did as an out if he ever wanted to bring him back? I think I read somewhere that the staff was very upset that Spike was going to die because that means they weren't going to have a season 2. And then Watanabe, throughout the entire production, he was saying, well, maybe he's going to live. Maybe he's going to live. So there's a part of me thinking maybe he built in that little immortal subplot as a way to fool them.
It's one of those things that it's like if you try going and taking apart David Lynch movies and you're just like, what did he mean by that? He'll have one of these really awkward sounding lines and you're trying to figure out just what the hell does this mean? And it carries a meaning. Problem is that the meaning, only David Lynch knows the meaning. You're never going to know the meaning. David Lynch knows, and he's not telling anyone anytime soon. I think in the case of Spike, though, I will say this too, that if I recall, I think Watanabe said in an interview, looks more like he's sleeping than dead. I think that some of the, adding the story of the cat, that was put in as It was something that Watanabe had in mind, and why he put it in, only he knows.
During the gunfight and his fight with Vicious, like Spike has been beat up a lot worse than that. Like how many times is he bandaged and like in traction throughout the episode? Like he's stabbed and he's bleeding from his head in the last episode. Like that's not that bad. Look, Julia's dead. He doesn't have a reason to live. Like you said, he's willing himself to die. It doesn't matter that the wounds aren't fatal. He has nothing left to live for. I'm with you. I think he's totally dead.
I'm glad to hear that, because I've talked to some people that'll say, no, I'll bet you he's still alive. I like to think he's still alive. Like, no. Spike is dead, and there's, as far as I'm concerned, that's it. You can go and wish for another season of Cowboy Bebop. It ain't happening.
I was gonna say, if they make another one, they should take your idea and do a prequel with Jet. Like, that would be really good.
You could have a lot of fun with that, I think. There's so many great ideas that you can continue that, you know, just in that same style of Bebop. It will allow them to go and do like a more full-on Lethal Weapon kind of homage at times, you know, with the Jet, whatever partner he has that day. I'd actually love to see Jet in some sort of Tango and Cash situation. Have Jet be the Stallone kind of guy, and he has a, you know, kind of a slobby kind of partner there.
I have like 12 pages of notes here, but this is probably a good place for us to wrap this up. We could always continue this and do another video talking about the original Cowboy Bebop, because there's so much to fucking talk about. I mean, it really is a great series, and I really recommend it. I mean, if people haven't seen it, one of the good things about the new Netflix show is that it's bringing Cowboy Bebop back into the public eye.
It's one of the top 3 best animes I've ever seen. It's got everything you could ask for in a series, and I cannot recommend Cowboy Bebop enough. It's got a little something for everybody, and honestly, you can't go wrong with it. It's one of the best animes out there for a reason.
Biohazard 2.
This week's question comes from Aiden, and Aiden writes, are there any English anime dub actors you like or dislike? Do you watch anime dubs? Thank you, Aiden, for sending me the question. Do I watch anime dubs? The short answer is yes. The long answer is I am very much a product of my time. And what I mean by that is I got into anime in the 90s, and the mentality back in the 90s was if you wanted the authentic Japanese experience, you watched the subtitled version. Because the subtitled version has the original Japanese actors, it has the original Japanese performances, it has the original Japanese soundtrack, it has the original Japanese mix. Even though you may not be able to speak the language, you are still hearing the anime the way it was heard in Japan. Another reason anime fans back in the 90s preferred subs was because the dubs were fucking terrible. A lot of dubs back in the 90s were bad. Even the good ones are not great. Recently, I was watching the Bubblegum Crises dub, which back then was held up as one of the great dubs of the time, and that dub ain't that great, you know? So with that said, you know, the deck was definitely stacked against dubbed anime back in the 90s. Even though I'm definitely a fan of subs and I prefer subs, I do like dubs, especially now. I've been watching a lot more dubbed anime. A lot of times I try to squeeze in watching anime when I'm working, and so like, you know, it's hard for me to work and read subtitles, but if I put on the dub, I could still get my work done and listen to the anime as it's playing in the background. So yes, even though I'm a 90s kid and I prefer subs, I do enjoy dubs. And yes, I do have voice actors that I like. When I first got into anime, the only animes I did watch were dubbed because I was a kid and I didn't feel like reading cartoons. So the early animes that I seen, like Vampire Hunter D, I loved Michael McConaughey. I really liked him as Vampire Hunter D. Barbara Goodson, I really liked as Doris Lang. Those were the first 2 voice actor names I ever learned. I really liked Mark Hildreth as Terry Bogard in the Fatal Fury animes, and he was also Hero in Gundam Wing, so he's cool. And Johnny Young Bosch as Vash is awesome. Are there any voice actors that I dislike? No, not particularly. I mean, like, a lot of those early AD Visions dubs, they're kind of annoying because it's like they use the same 5 actors in like every fucking dubbed version of a movie they ever did. If you watch the live action Gamera movies, everybody is dubbed by people from Evangelion. Fucking Masato is in it. It's really fucking distracting. But thank you, Aiden, for sending me a question. If you'd like to send me a question, and if you'd like to hear me answer it on a future edition of this program, send me an email at studiochojin@gmail.com, and I would be happy to read it eventually. So that wraps up this week's edition of Studio Chojin Raw. I hope you enjoyed this video. Next week, we are going back into the world of anime sex ninjas, and we will be talking about the La Blue Girl live action films. So with that said, I want to implore you to join the unholy army of the night and subscribe to Studio Chojin. You could like the video, you could leave a comment, you can do nothing at all, but thank you for watching the video. And once again, this is Reverend Paul saying, until we meet again.